Welcome once again to 31 Nights, 31 Frights. We are getting down to the wire at last, as we are now into the final 10 films of our inaugural season. Tonight's film is based on Washington Irving's classic story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's also our final Tim Burton film for the year. And yes, I heard that sigh of relief out there. You know who you are. Let's get started with the lowdown for Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow is directed by Tim Burton, and the writing credits are shared between Kevin Yeager and Andrew Kevin Walker for screen story and screenplay. And of course, Washington Irving himself gets a credit for creating the original short story. The cast is pretty solid. We have Johnny Depp as Ichabod Crane, Christina Ricci as Katrina Van Tassel, we have Casper Van Dien as Brom Van Brunt, Jeffrey Jones, another Tim Burton staple, as Reverend Steenwick. We have Richard Griffiths as Magistrate Phillips, Ian McDermott as Dr. Lancaster, Christopher Walken as the Hessian Horseman, and Christopher Lee as Burgomaster. What a cast, though. I mean, look at these guys. Johnny Depp, of course, needs no introduction. This was one of Christina Ricci's very first grown-up roles, in that she was not supposed to be playing a young child anymore. Lots of kids who crushed on her in the Addams Family movies moved forward to this one with the utmost glee, I'm sure. Jeffrey Jones, again, from Beetlejuice, another Tim Burton staple. We also have Uncle Vernon Dursley, Emperor Palpatine, Count Dooku, and Christopher Walken. Once again, with an amazing cast like this, it is criminal that this film is nothing more than a cult classic. This should have been a chart topper. It really should have.
3 persons have been murdered there, all within a fortnight. Each one found with the head lopped off.
Called loosely from the pages of Irving's story about the Headless Horseman comes this very Tim Burton take on Sleepy Hollow. In this version, Ichabod Crane is a police detective who is championing the use of science to further his detective work in a world that is still very much full of superstitious religious people. Of course, his science is all but useless in the face of an actual undead, headless man who rides a horse in Sleepy Hollow. This guy has already decapitated several people and will surely take out more unless Ichabod Crane can stop him. Now here, Johnny Depp steps out of his comfort zone a little, only to step right back into it, as the lovable, foolish bumbler who stammers over his words and has trouble articulating himself properly, like pretty much all of his other Tim Burton roles. Now, Crane does his best to follow the clues, crack the case, and win the girl in the end, who in this case is the lovely Katrina. What he ends up finding is something far more out of his league, that involves a great many more residents of Sleepy Hollow and a great many more dangers. Now, foremost, this is a Tim Burton film, so you should know what that means. As per usual, we have muted blues and grays as far as the color palette goes. We have a pale-faced Johnny Depp who looks like he needs a suntan, playing a bumbling nerd that no one believes could solve a single-color Rubik's Cube, much less any kind of grotesque murder. The film finds some balance between serious and darkly funny, with a bit of levity thrown in here and there that usually centers around Ichabod Crane's horrible awkwardness. It was an interesting choice to make Crane a detective instead of a schoolteacher. The driving force behind the Horseman makes sense for what it is, and the film's escalation of supernatural tension is very well paced. Now, there are a lot of deaths in this movie. And I mean a lot. and almost all of them are shrugged off by the cast so that none of the deaths actually have any kind of meaning or emotional connection attached to them. This was a common thing in the 90s. I mean, look how many high schoolers Joss Whedon offed in half a season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And yet not once did we see some kind of psychiatrist or psychologist or pair of FBI agents showing up to investigate all of these crazy murders. So this is a pretty decent film. It's not great, it's not terrible. It exists in that time and space between good and bad. Now there's a word for that: mediocrity. I feel the cast is mostly squandered here. They do well in their roles, of course, but there's not much for them to do. Most of them are, quite frankly, cannon fodder, or horseman fodder in this case.
Horseman!
Time for the verdict. Sleepy Hollow is a classic story, especially during the month of October. And this is certainly one of the better, more fun iterations of it, but that really isn't saying very much. There are worse ways to kill an October evening, but there are better ways as well. If you enjoy Burton films, you'll probably find this one reasonable. If you're over him, skip it. I gave Sleepy Hollow 2 Grimms. That's it for this edition of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. Thanks for listening and watching. I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button and checking out all of the other shows we have to offer here at Grimm's Scary Tales.